Sorry, I was still waiting to hear the music or something. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Covendom, our weekly podcast. We've sort of changed our format a little bit, but my name is Brian Kane, and these are my lovely co-hosts, Levi Rowland and Ellie Barnes. We are all high priests of the Alexandrian tradition. So this season, which is season 5, right? Season 5, right? Yeah. Season 5, we started bringing on guests, which we'd never wanted to do before because we were like, this is our show and it's not your show, it's our show. But we came up with a new format to where we bring on guests and we still sort of make it a bit about us because we do an ambush interview and the guest has prepared an ambush interview and we don't know what the topic is, and then they ask us like a panel of questions. Mm-hmm. And tonight our ambush interviewer is Karen Sayer. Karen Sayer is a high priestess of Alexandrian witchcraft from Washington State. She's the Wicked Witch of the Northwest, as we were just discussing. Karen and I go way back, so we've been working witchcraft in our early teens together before either one of us were Alexandrian witchcraft. So she has a lot of the dirt and knows where many dead bodies are hidden. So Karen's been on the show before. I think it was season 3 maybe, but she was on the show before with us as sort of a pop-up guest because she was with me in New Orleans. And she's going to be visiting me really soon here in Salem. So Karen is somebody who has been steeped in the occult for over 30 years. So she's for a while. Very magical, very private, very reclusive. Today she works mostly long distance with certain Alexandrian covens, including the New Orleans coven and soon the Salem coven. And I don't know if she visits the Pontchartrain coven. It wouldn't surprise me if she showed up in a parachute. But tonight we're honored to have her on, and we're just going to discuss, I don't know what we're going to discuss. So before she comes on, Levi will be doing a occult demonstration. We have titles for these things, but I think they change every week.
They do. We just make them up.
The Occult Minute demonstration. And then Ellie will be giving us some occult news, like news of the world of what's going on in the occult right now. And so I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Mr. Levi Rowland.
So, if you are...
and blessed be.
Blessed be. Blessed be.
I'm not there. I'm used to being able to fondle them under the table. This is the first time.
Never happened.
So I'm in Salem right now. So this is the first time that we've done this to where I'm long distance. And so now we know it's possible.
Looks
anyway,
great.
Blessed be Levi.
And it looks great. And we have Karen waiting in the wings is going to do it. We all love Karen. But so each episode, if you've been watching, these demonstrations are supposed to meant to give you a quick or brief overview of something. Ellie did a fantastic one in our last episode about an aspergillum, using herbs to make blessed holy water and then to use it to purify. Today, I am going to talk about something that I actually was talking about in my own coven recently, which is hierarchies. And it's kind of a preview of my class for WitchCon happening in February. If you haven't bought your tickets, you totally should. It's an incredible experience. But I'm teaching a class called Angels, Demons, and the Rest of Us on spiritual hierarchies. Which, if
so necessary.
Yes. If you have dabbled in the occult or you're a longtime practitioner, you are going to run into these. These are those long lists of like which angel and which herb and which correspondence do you use. And it can be a little daunting. So there's a couple really good sources for all of that. But today I wanted to break down an example of what we mean by things that are used in hierarchies. And that is something that is, I would say, a little confusing to a newcomer. So that's why I chose it, which is, and I know Ellie and Brian and Karen and everyone will have heard of this, the spirit of a planet.
Yes.
Versus what, Ellie?
An Olympic spirit?
Yeah, a spirit versus an intelligence. Yes, Brian got it.
Okay, an intelligence.
Versus an intelligence, right. So this stems from many sources, but it's predominantly known through Agrippa. In his 4 books of occult philosophy, he talks about intelligences and spirits of planets. This is all rooted in the concept of the great chain of being, right, which is this sort of Neoplatonic hermetic concept that everything in creation, everything from the stones and bones of the earth all the way up to the most cosmic principles, all of it is part of one big golden chain. And we use the planets in astrological magic as spheres of influence in that hierarchy. Like basically, who are you going to go talk to? Because you're probably not going to get an audience with the one ground of all being.
Right. Right.
So you go through intermediaries, right? Which are associated with particular things. So 2 of those are the spirit and the intelligence. Very popular in Agrippa. And I will say there are debates around this in the occult world. So I'm giving my source just in case anybody out there is like, well, I read in, Greer that whatever. Everyone has their own thing on this. But according to Agrippa, the spirit is good for baneful magic and the intelligence is good for benefic magic.
I didn't think I knew that.
It's something that I've been reading a lot lately and teaching on, so I kind of picked up on it too. And the reason given in a lot of occult texts is the spirit of a planet is basically its raw, natural energy. It just does. It doesn't think, it just does. It is the isness of it. So like, we've got a bunch of witches here. What do you think the spirit of Mars is like?
Warring, masculine, lusty, phallic.
Perfect.
Well, I was first introduced to this concept through the Magus, and in that they're talking about angels versus demons. They call the angel the intelligent, and the demon the spirit. And Eliphas Levi also sort of did that, where he sort of demonized the elementals because he was very Christian. So in his theology, the angels were the intelligence and the elementals were the spirits. Still lower. Same idea though, right?
Yeah, it's you find it everywhere in the occult. You'll find it broken down in different ways. But the intelligence was given preference for benefic magic because in the Agrippa system, it basically is something that has mindful will or intent, right? So to use an example, we used Mars earlier. The spirit of Mars would be useful for doing something martial, right? It just is martial. It's not going to be controlled. It's not going to be intent-based. The spirit of Mars is just going to act like Mars because that's what it is. The intelligence behind it has intent. So maybe you could use it for something like toppling a tyrant, right? You see stuff like that in a lot of like grimoires and things like that. So that's the differentiation. And that's just a taste. Any kind of correspondence chart. And I brought an example. This is the Magician's Companion. It's wildly popular in occult shops. I'm sure you've all seen it. But this is an example of how this person, Whitcomb, breaks down the charts. And you can see they're often very complex, involving planetary symbols, angels, Olympic spirits, which comes from other works, which choir of angels, what colors, what jewels, what metals, what plants, it goes on and on and on. But I thought I would just use this occult minute to do those 2 because they're the 2 that I find are the most confusing for newcomers. Like most people can figure out, okay, an angel, right? An archangel, Gabriel, Uriel, whatever. Most people can figure out stones and plants. But that spirit intelligence thing is, I think, where it starts to go a little wonky for people.
When we draw when we get the magic square of a planet, all those lists, that square of numbers, and we circle them and draw that shape.
The sigil,
Is that the intelligence or the spirit?
You can do in Agrippa, there's one for both. So what Ellie's talking about is planetary squares are squares of numbers that are considered corresponding to that planet.
Yeah.
And then if you draw between a sacred set of numbers, you'll end up with a sigil. There's one for the intelligence and one for the spirit of all the planets in Agrippa and multiple other grimoires as well. But yeah, so spirit, intelligence, it's a long list of hierarchies, but those are the 2. That's like an entry point if you're looking to get into that sort of magic.
So Agrippa probably is like the source material for a lot of this stuff. Yes, I would guess.
See a lot of it. Yeah, it's where it trickled down to us from,
and where it's consolidated for sure. Right,
in the Magus, I love the fact that it gives you the sections of it, and it tells you at one point, if you're going to invoke the spirit, you must always invoke the intelligence first. But then it goes on to tell you you shouldn't invoke the spirits at all. You should just work with the intelligence.
Yes, some magicians really don't like that. Some magicians are really against that dichotomy of spirit equals baneful, intelligence equals benefic. But you see it pop up a lot. And
in his case, it was demons and angels. And he was probably Christian, right?
Yeah, it's like they're using a Christian framework, so some people are really not into that. But I think the thing I like to go on is, are you looking to harness raw energy or something with intention, right? So that's like a better way than good and evil, which I know is like, I don't have a problem with that. Everybody knows I'm like 2 clicks left of a Catholic. But like, I think that a lot of people get hung up on that. But yeah, it's more about, do you want something...
Do you want full responsibility or help?
Exactly, right? Do you want something with some intent behind it?
Yeah, full responsibility or guidance. I see you.
If a grizzly bear is charging me in the woods, though, I'm going to call on the spirit of Mars, not the intelligence.
Yeah, I want
raw power right then.
Protection immediately.
Somebody to go into battle for me, not to think about how they should go into battle for me.
Yeah, exactly. So it depends on what you're doing.
I love that.
So that was my little occult minute.
Okay. And we
Well,
can,
the funny thing is, I'm actually seeing this happening, and like I can picture Ellie. Actually, most people would not be thinking about such things if a bear was attacking them.
Ellie would.
But I can actually see that.
they've been in the news a lot lately. All this bear sightings, they're everywhere, and everywhere you turn, it's like cocaine bear.
Before you do your news of the world, I just wanted to say I do see all of your fabulous comments. We get them from Facebook. We get them from YouTube, depending on what you're watching. So don't worry, we will answer them when we have time at the end.
I cannot see your comments. It's very
Brian
fun
cannot,
because I'm
and
here.
this makes me very happy
Yeah.
because I get to
I have
curate.
to trust Levi with the
They
comments.
love you the most, Brian, and you're the most beautiful. They're all
That's
saying
all
that
it says
now.
over and over
It
again,
is.
Brian. Just how gorgeous.
All right, I'll try to be brief on the news. As always, I look online for pagan and occult news, not pagan, occult news, witchcraft news, because I don't have a journal coming into my mailbox, and I'm not really looking at Facebook or Instagram for my news. But so I type that in, news in August, late August, in the magical or witchcraft communities, and I do tend to read the Wild Hunt or Pathos, just because those are sort of current. But today I typed that in, news in witchcraft and magic in August 2023. And what came up strongly and repeatedly was the discussion of the Parliament of World Religions that occurred in Chicago in August. And I really didn't know about it, to be honest, but it is a nonprofit organization that promotes religious tolerance and education around the world. And this year was Indigenous peoples and more of an environmental push and movement. But that happened in Chicago. 7,000 people attended live from 95 countries and 210 traditions, and it celebrates global interfaith movement. Phyllis Currat was the presiding priestess. She is a well-known witch practitioner. Whatever we might think, she is well-known. And Selena Fox from Circle Sanctuary was there. So that was kind of an interesting idea that in governments and in nonprofits, there is consistent work being done. I know Tannenbaum.org in New York does the same kind of work.
Not to interrupt, do you know who else was there and you can follow on social media and is posting a lot about it?
Who?
Byron Ballard.
Byron Ballard.
Yeah.
I forgot that. I did see that on her Facebook
Friend
post.
of the show, and she teaches at Hex
Yes,
Fest.
yes.
She's
And
fabulous.
she went and representing, I guess, maybe Appalachian or more rural folk traditions. But in addition to that, I found a couple of news articles that in India, witch hunts are still legal, and in the last 10 years, 1,500 women, primarily older women, have been lynched, hanged, or killed for being accused of practicing witchcraft, which would be malevolent magic on their neighbors. Ghana in Africa just voted in, finally, 2023, that it is illegal to kill people because they've been accused of witchcraft. I thought that was really humble and nice of them to finally say, hey, it's not cool to kill people who are accused of witchcraft. And then the contemporary witch hunt now sort of revolves around LGBTQ plus environment, where we'd find an opposition group, usually strong white Christian groups are the vocal people that say we don't like others, they're not good, they're bad, they're of the evil side. They are spirits, not intelligences. And we want to get rid of that. So it goes on today. Even though we think the witch hunts and killing witches is of the past, it's not. It's going on in countries today. So I think the Parliament of World Religions kind of talks about that. And in July, the UN Security Council, United Nations Security Council, accepted an unprecedented resolution on religious freedom and gender equality, UN Resolution 2686. And it was propelled by the fact that many historic religious sites are getting bombed or blown up in war zones. Like 115 sites in Ukraine have been damaged by bombs from Russia in the Ukraine-Russia war. And that would be their sacred spaces. I don't know exactly if that's statuary or sacred wells or stones or things
Greek
like
Orthodox
that. There's also
stuff.
a lot of
not
folk.
Greek, excuse me, Eastern Orthodox.
Eastern Orthodox. There's a lot of folk magic still going on in Ukraine. And remember, this was a big story when the Taliban was trying to take over Afghanistan in 2001. They videoed themselves blowing up those beautiful big Buddha statues because they said it was idolatry. So I just wanted to say it's still going on in the world today, around the world, and all of us who participate in religious freedom need to pat ourselves on the back and keep promoting the rights of every person to believe and practice as they would like to. That's my news for the day.
Nice. Parliament of
I have to
Religions.
tell you that when I hear the stories of the ancient relics being blown up, it makes my blood boil.
Doesn't it?
You know, those Buddhist statues, and not to get on a bandwagon, but communist China is doing it now because they're starting to move towards Buddhist stuff after all this time. They let it alone. They just dismantled, this is about a year or two ago, an enormous giant triple fold Kuan Yin statue. It was a more modern statue, but they just dismembered it. This thing was like huge. It was beautiful. And it makes my blood boil because, as you guys know, we don't get to have nice things like that anymore.
I know.
Napoleon's army used the Sphinx in Egypt for target practice. They're the
I think
reason
that might be a myth. I don't know.
It's a legend about.
Is it?
It's
You
a
don't think it's
legend
true?
from the
Yeah.
Napoleonic
I
Wars.
don't think it's real, Ellie, because he didn't do anything like that to anything else. Yeah.
Who blew off the top of the Great Pyramid?
That was probably just weather. Probably
Or it
weather.
might have been during World War II.
I think it was
one
a
of the
specific
one of the
attempt.
most grotesque desecrations in modern times, in my opinion, was when Greece has a complicated relationship with the Axis powers in World War II, and the Parthenon was hung with Nazi symbology and was used as like a sort of Nazi temple in Greece, and there's pictures of it. It's horrible.
It's terrifying. I just always assumed they didn't really have a choice, really. But
It feels very
I don't know.
blasphemous when you see it, though, to see all the swastikas hanging off the
Yes,
Parthenon.
it does. Yeah.
Because, Athena would not have been pro-fascist.
No.
So keep standing up for yourself, fellow witches. It's okay to be a witch.
It was a good news, though, because a lot of people don't realize the Parliament of World Religions was one of the major vehicles for a lot of non-traditional Western religions that are not traditional to the West. Like, for example,
Indigenous.
Swami Vivekananda, the Theosophists, an enormous amount of people that were influential in the occult world spoke with the Parliament. So it used to be a place where a lot of alternative spiritualities were celebrated, spiritualism, things like that. So it was a big deal in the
How
old occult
old is
world.
that group? I don't know. I read several articles today, but Parliament of World Religion, like maybe 20 years old?
It's older than that.
Is it?
Because,
Okay.
Vivekananda, it goes all the way back to the early 20th.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was
I think it had a big hand in fighting
Semitism. Yeah.
Thank you. And there was because you keep talking about it, there was a thing that's happening that I think they were addressing. I think it's in Brazil, where there's actually indigenous tribes that are actually possibly getting some companies thrown out of the jungles because they got brought up to election and the people are voting them out. And I think that's fantastic. We don't get very many wins,
No, right.
No, we do not. So it's good when you get a couple.
Yeah.
So read more about these things online and educate ourselves so we can take action, donate, or go to the Parliament of World Religions and listen in person.
Yeah.
Okay.
And don't forget all those poor little albino kids getting killed as witches in Africa. If you want to donate money, that's a cause.
I want to adopt an albino
For
kid.
people in the craft.
Into a
Well,
weird place.
they've got people who save them, who go over, rescue them. They have camps and things like that. But they believe, like, if you chop their hand off, it's a very magical hand, and so people do that. Yeah.
Yeah, witchcraft.
And since I'm
laws
two
are
clicks
pretty
from
harsh.
being an albino, like Ellie,
Yeah, I know,
it's
right?
noble cause.
With this lighting, we all look like one. But yes, no, that's very true. Witchcraft persecution. There's actually entire villages in certain sub-Saharan African communities of banished women and men who have been accused of witchcraft, and they're not allowed to live in the main community
Right.
anymore.
Right.
So it's a fascinating thing that happens where they're accused of malefic magic, right? And it still very much carries.
And like Ellie said,
lot of
it's still a thing
punishment.
with women in India
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
Too.
And
Yeah.
the poor.
And it's still happening in America in certain communities. There are people in dominated poor church communities that are, accusing some woman of being a witch, a Satanist who isn't, and they may not be killing her, but she's shunned. Yeah, so it's still happening.
I can actually speak from experience there in Appalachia, especially in communities that are heavily driven by the charismatic movement, like Pentecostal churches. And this is not a smear against charismatic Christianity. There's lots of great people in it. But in really, really isolated charismatic communities where I'm from, you'll often find people who are convinced that like their daughter got possessed, and the daughter is put through this just awful experience
Exorcism.
of deliverance, what they call deliverance. They don't use the exorcism's too Catholic for them. They use the term deliverance.
Probably a lot of public humiliation too, or in the church.
Yes, in the
humiliation.
church, and and then they confess their sins publicly, and it's a very harrowing experience. It's wild to watch because it seems
today would be a lovely day for an exorcism.
Yeah.
Well, it still goes on.
Bring on the challenge.
Still goes on.
I know.
So I think we're ready to bring on our special guest, Karen Sayer.
Okay, I'm going to bring her on. There she is.
Oh, Karen,
Blessed be Karen.
Blessed be Karen. So nice
Blessed
to
be
see you
Karen.
today.
So tell us, what is the topic of this week's ambush interview?
Today's topic is divination.
Ooh. A good one-word one. This is going to get heated.
And we really don't know. It's true. We really have no idea until we hear the guest.
We never get prepped.
No. So we
don't want to know because we wanted to keep it
ad lib.
Keep it.
I'm feeling hot. I'm feeling like I'm going to act.
Well, some of the questions are rather simplistic, so your answers will be, but some of the answers might be a little lengthy because the question itself is a little bit lengthy, and we'll have to see what you guys say. It'll be very interesting.
I'm excited.
Me too.
Are you ready for the very first easy question?
We are.
All right. This is pretty simple. Why do you do divination, or why do you not do divination?
Ooh.
Who's the question for?
Yeah, who's first?
You got to
Ellie first.
Oh, Ellie first. Okay.
Ellie first.
This is funny. I'm just going to be really quick about it. When I was really little, before I ever heard about like the Gypsy Witch tarot deck, which is the one I got at a yard sale in middle school, or the tarot, I wrote little notes on scraps of paper and cut them up. And the notes said, Ellie's Christmas presents are better than her brother Charles's Christmas presents. Ellie is the most popular girl in second grade. Ellie's hair is longer and shinier than Cynthia's hair. Whatever these little things were that were on my mind in second or third grade. And I put these little notes in a bag, a little cloth bag that I had for like doll clothes. And when I wanted to strengthen my personality, because I was very shy and withdrawn and inward as a little kid, and I was very self-aware and had a lot of anxiety. Hard to imagine that's true now, but it was true. And I would think about my problem, and I would reach in that bag and I would pull out a note. But all the notes were pro Ellie. There was no note that said Ellie's shitty. No way. So that was my first little bit of divination, and it gave me a sense of security and power, honestly. And today I'm a diviner to control the world and control my world around me. Absolutely, I have to know everything.
Knowledge is power.
Mr. Levy?
Why do I do divination?
Why do you do divination?
Or don't you?
I do. I do divination. I will say, the longer I am initiated, the less divination I want to do. It's not my favorite magical practice by far. I do think I am a pretty solid reader, particularly in cartomancy and astrology. But I would say I do divination as a spiritual practice. Right? Like I enjoy connecting to the sort of archetypal stories that are a part of a system like tarot or astrology. I feel like what I think divination is incredible for is choice anxiety. I think a lot of our ancestors did not really have the kind of choice anxiety that we do. Right? It was like you didn't get a lot of choices around who you were going to marry, your career, what's going to happen, you just didn't, unless you were, the highest ranking nobility. And so
that's probably why I don't remember.
Exactly.
And
Brian
women,
doesn't remember those lives.
And women didn't get any
and women
choices
got almost
at all.
none. Right? And so I think, which I think is hilarious, because the vast majority of clients of fortune tellers are women.
50-year-old women.
And I think the reason I do divination is because sometimes you just want to give things up to the gods. Like you don't want to have to do your pro and con list and, this very secular, psychological kind of way of dealing with everything, I think is sometimes overwhelming. And sometimes if I'm just like, what, the gods will show me, and you cast the horror chart or you lay down the cards and the gods show you and you move on. It's almost like a divine out of like this wretched postmodern, anxiety that we're all dealing with, where there's 1,000 choices and you're surrounded by screaming screens and there's no peace. And like everything is like, do it now, hustle culture, like right now, make a choice. And I think divination is this really beautiful way to be like, I'm just going to like, let go and let goddess, and whatever happens, happens.
So you would ask maybe what's in my best interest, or what's what's in the best interest for the one or the many.
That's my favorite kind of divination.
I do that a lot too. And then you see what the message is, and then you don't do that. You just go and you shuffle again and you say, but what do I want to do? And then you do that one.
I also think it's really good for meditation. Right?
So
it makes you mindful.
So many great tools in divination. Okay, good.
Brian, why do you or do not?
I think I'm doing it right now through sleep deprivation and wine.
I'm having a vision. He's having a vision, everybody.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know how this is going. I just flew into Salem today, so I only got like 2-3 hours of sleep. And so drinking wine to get me through, really. I think this is a great topic. Most people might not know Karen's last name, Sayer, means seer. It actually is a family name that implies divination. I'd have to say that, of course, we all go through these different processes. And like Levi and Ellie, I once did it sort of professionally, but it's also very personal to me. So I'd say, for the most part, I think I do it when I'm developing strategies and to get a bird's eye view and develop strategies. Usually these strategies are to help other people in my life because I'm trying to figure out what they need or what they're not telling me about what they need or what they don't know. For myself, when I'm reading for myself, there's one of two ways I do it. One is that I develop a magical strategy for myself. And when I read for myself, I give it space. The other way is to go to an oracle, and I'd never tell the oracle I'm working with them usually. I did tell Ellie when she read me at Delphi, because we were at Delphi.
I mean, that's a little
so that I told her then. But usually I'll go to a very psychic witch and I'll just start talking to them and asking them questions, and I trick them into giving me the answers. And they usually don't know what's happening. But that's only for myself, because I do think we're jaded when it comes to our own selves. So usually I try to give it space and develop a magical strategy about how I'm going to handle something magically. So it's more about, like, divination is for me coming up with a plan about how I'm going to approach something in the magical world and in the mundane world, because they're together.
Yeah.
But not so much fortune telling anymore. And whenever I do fortune telling, it's cards and it's about my love life, and it's always horrible.
Those are all extremely good answers. To touch on, I myself used to scry a lot when I was younger, and I sort of got out of it because I developed other interests, herbology, all that stuff. And I recently, after visiting New Orleans for the first time, I got back into scrying because I never really dealt with ancestors before. And that was something, and all through all the conversations I had with the many interesting people I've met down there, it was really interesting to me because I don't know any of my ancestors. My mother's side, I don't know many of them. My father's side, I have no idea who my grandparents even are. So it was interesting for me to delve into just asking who my ancestors are, and maybe that they could come say hello, because I have no idea, which could be good or bad depending upon how they say hello. We don't know.
Valid.
But yeah, that was my thing, was just an interest in.
How did you do that scrying? Like with cards or with a crystal ball or a pendulum?
Mostly, actually, for me, a black mirror works beautifully, and I'm not sure exactly why. I have a very sharp imagination in my eyes. I have a very good imagination, so I'm able to pick up imagery.
Does anyone else hear the severe echo that's come up again? I hate to be that person who's like, no one else hears it, just me.
No,
there's no echo on this end.
No echo on this end.
Okay, no echo? Okay.
Maybe, I don't know why. Now it's gone. It's gone. Must have been on my end. Sorry, guys.
It was an ancestor, Brian, coming in.
I think that my earbud might have slipped a little bit, and so it was coming through my screen. Sorry.
You're all good.
It could be. No, it's okay. It's all right. We want to make sure everybody can hear.
That's why I was concerned, because it was so Darth Vader-y. I was like, is this coming through the whole show?
As long as they can hear me okay, because I am using a gaming headset, so it might be a little bit different.
No, you sound perfect.
You sound perfect. You do too, Brian. You sound perfect.
Yeah, everybody sounds great to me. So, all right. So the next question is fairly simple. What tools do you use?
Okay.
Levi first.
I'll start with. Yeah, I was about to say I want to start with Levi on this one.
For other people, almost always tarot or horary astrology. Right. Horary astrology is a tool I really enjoy. It's a form of astrology where you cast a chart for the moment the question is asked, and it's interpreted in its own unique ways.
Okay.
You can find out more in the Art Cosmic. But I do enjoy horary astrology. and tarot. I really love Lenormand cards and sort of French and German oracle decks from that time period, 17th to early 20th century. There's a lot of them. People try to make them into these big, huge things, but really it depends on the region. There's no canon about how to read them. Everybody's got their own
I think they nail the basics. Lenormand.
I really love Lenormand and those kind of decks.
Right in there.
I have done scrying, but I will say the only time I've done scrying and had any powerful effect from it was in angelic magic, like the use of the crystal ball over the gold triangle and the almadel and all that, and the wax. And so I enjoy that as a form of divination. But my favorite form of divination is bibliomancy. If I just have a question and I want to take my mind out of the choice anxiety like I was talking about. So I just go pick a holy book off the wall of books in my house and then ask the question and interpret whatever line I flip to. It's like my favorite form.
That's beautiful.
It's so simple.
More bibliomancy.
That's
I never
lovely.
did that.
Yeah, it's so simple. I love it.
How about we go to Brian? What tools do you use, if you use any currently? Because I know you've used some in the past, of course.
Well, like all witches, I've experimented with several different kinds of tools. I've experimented with runes, scrying, all of the things. But I'd say tarot is my go-to tool. And I really am still a Rider deck person. That's my favorite deck. I like the Thoth deck and some of the others, but Rider is my favorite deck. But I'd say, actually, the truth of the matter is, most of the time, my divination comes through psychic sight. So I just fix my mind on a problem, and the answer will come to me. Sometimes this is a conjunction, particularly with myself, with tarot cards, because tarot cards just sort of start telling the story for me. Mm-hmm. So I'd say most of the time I don't use any tools at all.
I'm a Marseille girl.
Mm-hmm. I'm a Marseille girl, true.
Yeah.
For my clients, I use a 3-way method, what I call my big clients, people that have worked for me for years and want a lot of really serious, in-depth work done, not just, is this guy going to call me back kind of question. Astrology, I look at the natal chart and either secondary progressions and transits to look at the bones of their life, the structure of 100 years, because you see the big patterns and the big style of what that life looks like. I use tarot cards to answer questions from today up to about a year out as far as predicting the future, to find out things about other people and facts around the client and their questions in the mundane world. And I use medical palmistry to analyze their health, their mental health, and their genetics. And I put all 3 of those together for the clients that spend more time with me, which would maybe 2 or 3 hours a month and are willing to pay and have that much effort put there. But those are serious people that are working on their life holistically, about their personal development, their big decisions, and then how they're working that out in their health and their body, and how they're working that out in the world. Otherwise, it's 15-minute card readings where I answer questions like, no, he's not calling you back because you're crazy and boring, or I don't say that. I say, oh my gosh, he's so preoccupied with his career right now. He's really kind of a dud anyway. I think you should go in another direction. Yeah.
He'd rather be at work than talk to you.
I do have a crystal ball. I love to use that. I have a black mirror, but that's a little bit more time consuming. Like, I just need to get in and get out a lot of times.
Yeah.
I've had some really phenomenal success with scrying in actually having like real visual experiences. The problem is they never amounted into meaning anything. So like, whether it was my ability to interpret or not, but I'd see images that never mattered. And I always feel like I was picking up on something like a radio that had nothing to do with me. I was young. Yeah.
I had one very interesting experience, was many, many years ago. I was, my mid-30s, somewhere around there. And this is when my brother was getting married to his now ex-wife. And yes, now ex-wife. And not huge fans. But anyways, I did a simple scrying asking just, why does she want to marry him so bad? And all I kept seeing was a baby.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
And that's exactly what happened. Mm-hmm. And I found that's the only real time that I can really say absolutely 100% came true, because I kept seeing this child over and over and over again. And A few months later, she was pregnant. And I found that was the only real time, and it kind of freaked me out a little bit. I was much younger, and I was not used to scrying at the time, so it kind of tripped my brain out a little bit. I was like, oh, no.
I love that you did it over and over. I do also sometimes to what I call either counter read, ask the opposite question and see what the answer is so I can compare and contrast, or do it repeatedly, like once a week. And then I'm like, oh, this is what I keep seeing.
Patterns.
Sometimes I'm just not sure if I'm getting the right message, and I want to be 100% sure so I don't go off and do something that may be the wrong message, you know what I mean?
Me too.
All right, the next, are we done with that subject? I think we're done with that subject.
Yeah.
Question 3.
The next subject, this is a little bit, we talked about this a little bit already, but question 4, we'll start with Brian this time. Brian, do you use these tools to talk to ancestors or for self-divination purposes? Let's say your tarot deck.
Well, I don't try to talk to my ancestors because I have I think I have a very standard craft idea of that. So I do honor my witchcraft initiatory ancestors on certain rituals. But that's these are people who are sharing my religion. They're sharing in my belief in the other worlds and reincarnation, and they're on the same journey that I'm on. So I'm religiously honoring that journey, regardless of where they are, whether they've reincarnated or whether they're on the other side, and they're invited to join into that journey. So, and that's the one time that I do it. But on a regular basis, if I was just going to think about my secular ancestors, I know some of them were horrible people. I know they were horrible people. And I also believe in reincarnation, and I believe in all these other things. So and they're not witches. So I don't really, I don't think being dead makes you more interesting, more powerful, more magical, or more wise. And I figure if you're dead and I didn't know you, if you are someone that loved me, I can see you hanging out. Like if you're a grandma, a friend, something like that, because, your life.
You mean my neighbor doesn't want to hang with me?
So sorry, because of where we are, if we overtalk, it lags. Sorry about that. So I didn't quite hear what you said, Karen. What did you say?
I just made a bad joke saying, are you telling me my dead neighbor doesn't want to hang with me? Come on.
Well, actually, you're making my point. She might, and that's why I wouldn't talk to her.
Anybody who wants to be here.
So to shorten up the question, I have done mediumship for people before successfully. That was their journey, not mine. I don't really tarry along with the dead. Doesn't mean I don't believe in them. I do. I hope that the good ones have something better to do. I only think about my beloved ones, like someone who's died within my life who I knew, or someone who's really very close to my blood ancestry who would be caring about the immediate family. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, I have worked with them. I believe in them, but it's not something I'm obsessed with. So no, I do not use tarot cards for that at all. I have used tarot cards as a crutch in my early mediumship because I didn't really know how to be a medium. I was just like, somebody was just like, be a medium, and so you used what you used. And I think the tarot cards are great because they're really just, you're just knocking on a psychic door. And I believe, for instance, scrying for me is knocking on a psychic door. Even though I've had these instances of actually seeing movie images in the object, like I said, it didn't amount to anything, and it was far and few between. Scrying helps you get into that altered state where you see the images in your mind, or you're seeing things, patterns in the object it's the same idea, right? So I like those things, but I like scrying just for shifting into altered states and connecting with certain types of energies like angels or whatever. But as far as the dead, I guess I've used certain things to see the dead in, or as a channel for that, but only usually like once a year will I do that. So blessed be.
Blessed be.
Okay, how about one to Ellie? Do you use your preferred tools to talk to ancestors, or mostly for self-divination purposes?
Mostly self.
Although I think...
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think you gave a pretty good answer even on that before. You do a lot of practices. You help others. So I think you use your tools for a lot of other people. But you said mostly for self-divination?
Yeah, I'm in the same line of thinking as Brian on the ancestor subject. I think that humans have a soul and that it's eternal, but I do believe in reincarnation, so I think it's pretty hard to try to pinpoint exactly what personality and what lifetime. You know, the client that you're helping, or in this case, if I were doing it for myself, what do I need from these people that are passed on? And that really goes back to me or the client. Where is their question? What's going on for them that they're asking to see the opinion or frame of reference for a family member or friend of theirs that is deceased? I do have to do mediumship a lot more than I ever did originally, and I can see that it's helpful and it works in a certain capacity, but I don't use it for myself. I just don't think my ancestors are on the same page, and they don't really have the information I want for myself. But I do tarot readings and pendulum sometimes for myself, even for simple questions like lately, which house insurance agent in Florida,
God.
I'm not kidding you guys, house insurance on the Gulf Coast
I'm going through it right now.
millions of dollars, okay? So
If you are an insurance agent, please call 309
I
Goddess.
just wrote a really nice review for the guy I finally picked, but I looked at them tarot-wise and pendulum-wise because there's differences of thousands of dollars in a yearly premium.
Yep.
And I really like the guy that I decided with tarot was the right guy, and he turned out to be fabulous, and he gave me an incredibly good deal. So yeah, okay.
Yeah.
My answer.
All right. And last but not least, Levy, do you use your preferred tools to talk to ancestors or for self-divination purposes? Mostly.
Please don't call him Levy. It's super confused me.
You might. Sorry.
I don't do ancestor work at all. So I used to have a mean little joke, I would say, where I would say I have nothing to say to the Calvinist ghosts of Appalachia. But I don't. I have very heretical beliefs. I won't go too far into them because I'm guessing it might come up again if we talk about mediumship. I don't really believe that you can contact people beyond death. I think you can contact memories. I think you can contact feelings, but I don't think souls work that way. So I don't
agree.
I don't think you're actually talking to any sort of anything meaningful.
I might say the Akashic record. There's an imprint of that last life there, and we're looking at kind of that.
I could get there.
Maybe like remote viewing.
I would say that would even be a stretch for me, though. I think I don't think death works that way. I'm a big believer in reincarnation, and it's weird to me that a lot of people in the occult claim to be, and then act like it doesn't happen. So it's like this weird thing that you see a lot where people are like, reincarnation's super important to my beliefs, but then they act, talk, and live as if no soul ever gets reincarnated. And I'm like, that's weird. Like that, and
Particularly in the craft these days.
yes, in the craft,
Yes.
it's rampant.
Like, that's our whole belief. And you hear all these people, they never mention it. They're just like, oh, yeah.
I think
Like,
that
they're all gone, guys. They're not
Yeah.
here. Only the sad ones are here.
the one caveat I will give is I understand that for a lot of people, particularly in lineage traditions of, who that have practiced ancestor worship for
Right.
many, many, many centuries. I
Right.
mean, it's quintessential in Confucian China and Taoism, and and it's wildly popular in African diasporic religion. And
Let us not
Yeah.
forget also, Levi, the sacred backstories.
yes, but it's like not my thing, is what I'll say. But I also don't. I have to be careful what I say because I can be very hard on this subject because I have a very low opinion.
Just this subject.
Of,
just this
I
one.
do. I have a very low opinion of ghost botherers, and so I have to be careful not to let that knee-jerk dislike that I have go so far as to be disrespectful of someone's like deep-rooted
Absolutely.
spiritual.
We want to contact
tradition.
your intelligence and not your spirit.
Sure,
with
like
the
it's like,
attitudes
I
about
don't want to. I
ancestor
don't want to be
worship.
so far down my sort of
I-
knee-jerk anger.
I think people are really obsessed with it because they're afraid of the grave.
Oh yeah.
And it's trendy because the ATRs are, I don't want to say trendy, don't say that, but I mean, they're more publicly available to learn about, and the African traditions, and they really focus around ancestor
Ancestral.
work. So it's
Yeah.
just, we didn't know about it. It's been kind of a more recent thing where people can check in and identify with their ancestors.
Yeah, I love how Christian's plugging his book in the comments. Yes, Christian wrote a wonderful book on working with the
Right,
dead.
right.
Which is Book of the Dead, available through Warlock Press. See, I gave you a plug.
Well, his perspective is more well-rounded
It
than
is.
what you will encounter in most.
It's
I
a
would
great
agree with
book.
that.
There's chapters on all kinds of parts of that too. It's not just one
Yeah,
point of view.
I would not say that Christian is engaging in baseless superstition. I would not say that at all.
No.
No, his books are very well written. All right. Well, I guess I can kind of skip over that question. We sort of answered it. All right. Here's another one. We touched on it, but I'd like to go a little more in depth. And we'll start with Ellie on this one. Do you call upon any specific, you can just answer yes or no. You don't have to name it. Any specific god, goddess, or ancestor to aid you in your divination work? Or do you do it just solo?
I call on the egregore of the tool. I really believe certain tarot decks have an actual inner plane teacher egregore that is created and generated over years of use, and I'd certainly want to use that mind set. And then in my own world, I do have personal connections with gods and beings that a variety of them that I've had from childhood and then all the way up to my Alexandrian initiation that I absolutely connect to and ask for the best work possible that I can do. Yeah.
How about you, Levi? Levy, whatever. It's going to confuse me the rest of my life. Do you call upon any specific god or goddess, or well, not ancestor for you, or do you do it primarily solo when you do divination work?
I don't think I ever do divination that doesn't involve prayer. That's just a huge part of it
Prayer.
for me. I mean, the root word of divination is divine, right? So it's like, it's like the whole point. There is one of the things that I am a big believer in when it comes to divination, and this is a good place to bring this up, is like, I don't believe the idea that somebody was born with a special gift and that is what makes you psychic is a really modern belief, right? It's a very modern belief. Historically, it was the person was able to do it because they had a good relationship to the gods, right? They were chosen by the gods. It was the gods that were, in charge of this. The runes were Odin's gift, it's like, which there's a whole debate about whether or not they were ever used for divination anyway amongst actual academics and not, the Ostricher community. But I think in most instances it was a religious act, and so I like to keep it that way.
Me too.
So like when I cast something or when I do something, I'm really into making it a prayerful experience where I feel like I'm asking. A really good one is Hecate Sotera from the Chaldean oracles. That's a deity that I think is a powerful image because she's described in the Chaldean oracles as the goddess through which all reality is mediated, right? The flux of being in a way. So I sometimes will do that, but sometimes I just make it a prayer. Literally, I'm just like, oh, great Mother Isis or whatever, and use a tool and see what happens.
Me too.
Brian, do you use any god, goddess, or ancestor to aid you, or you just sort of do it? Because I know that some people do it solo, which I find very interesting. Do you call upon somebody to aid you?
Well, when I'm doing it in a religious context, yes. Like I was speaking to you guys earlier, a lot of times I just fix my mind on a problem and it might come to me in a dream. It might just come to me with knowledge. It might come to me because somebody tells me, but I put out to the universe that I'm wanting this information. And I think it sets your psychic mind to work in sort of a non-sentient way. But when I'm shucking cards, when I was shucking cards for a client, no, I wasn't asking the gods for help, and there are times when I'm quite viscerally just going off my own abilities. So it depends on the situation. If I'm approaching it as a religious context, yes, always, which, agree with Levi and all that. But then I have to be honest, there are other times where no, it's just visceral. It's just me. And what I will say is in the big stuff, I think the big answers about yourself, you're going to need God's help. But if you're just working off of, your natural latent abilities for something small, it might not require that. So I think it's more instinctual. I don't think we really think about it. I think as priesthood, if we're going for something bigger for ourselves, we're always going to go that way. We're going to pray, right? We're going to invoke. We're going to do a ritual. But when Sally comes and says, is my husband cheating on me? Well, as a reader, you're being psychic completely right away and trying to ascertain whether this person is crazy, paranoid, which is often the case, even married? You've got to do all these things, and you have to decide whether you're going to really try to see for this person or whether you're going to try to help them as a healer. Because a lot of readers spend a lot of time being healers, and they're not really seeking your future, because you need to settle accounts with what your trauma is. So it was an old form of counseling. So I think you should, but I think I pray and I invoke every day. So it kind of, it's a complicated and simple answer at the same time. So sometimes, but not always.
Yeah, it's one of those answers that's hard to answer, because I myself, I call upon I actually use multiple gods and goddesses for various and then for scrying, I use nothing. I could do it completely solo, because I don't want anything to interfere with my outside imagery, with my inside imagery. I don't want anything to interfere with that. And I find it much easier to go into my zone than focusing on somebody else as an aspect sometimes.
May I
Sorry,
add?
you might hear my cat meowing.
I would like to add something. I know Levi and I have talked about this a few times. I really like to distinguish myself separate from a psychologist or therapist, as a psychic and a diviner.
Yep.
And I say to clients periodically, you need to go get a psychological therapist for this problem.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And
don't you think, Ellie, that you have to sometimes guide the real crazy ones, because
every day? But
that's what I mean.
But in that differentiation between, am I calling on forms other than myself, or God forms, or what I call higher intelligences? I do that almost all the time, because I'm trying to say it's not my judgment on a person, it's not my view of psychology on something, it's their karma, their lifetime after lifetime that they're working through. So I don't want to judge whether they're in love with somebody who's married and say, well, you shouldn't do that, that's not healthy, blah, blah, blah. So if I go above my brain, what I say, above our brains into the infinite field, I'm asking that the highest one, the mind, is commenting in a very large perspective, not just my local current view of what psychology looks like for people. Because I think that people use us as psychologists, and a lot of times it's not healthy. They try to, but it's not. And
we're not really therapists. I think
No.
When I reference that, I think there's a primitive aspect of it that is.
Oh, I say all the
course.
time. I say all the time, diviners were the world's first psychotherapists.
We were.
I mean, I do believe
we still
that.
are.
Yeah.
And I think that in a world in a secular world in particular, we're now confessing priests. I had so many clients who really just wanted to confess something to me.
Right.
They don't want, I mean? They just need a stranger to tell their sins to.
With their partner in the room, walking around the store, and they're like, I'm cheating on him.
Yeah. Oh, God.
But people don't go to
Every
church
day.
anymore in a lot
And
of
he's
places.
walking around looking
They
at
don't have
books,
that.
and you're like, oh, God.
I'd be horrified.
My favorite is when that person decides to get a reading, and then like the person confessing the adultery doesn't know that, and they come out of the area, and then husband or wife or whatever's like, I decided to get one anyway, and then they sit down, and that other person's face, like, it's just staring at you.
Yeah, that's a rough one when the wife goes first or the husband goes first, and then the wife decides to go, and you're like, oh, God.
I don't want to do this.
That's when I call on God, help me.
Dear God, girl, I need you.
If you wanted to be a wicked witch, that would be the time to just tell the person, wow.
Or to be like, you didn't tip me well, so I'm kidding. I would never be so immoral.
we would never do that.
Never.
We're some of the best readers you'll ever find.
Oh, I think I might say something like, well, someone in your life is deceiving you, just to watch the partner squirm.
I have literally done things like that. I've said things like, are you sure? When they've been like, we have a great marriage.
Yeah, that's one of the problems, I guess, that diviners who are out there, giving tarot readings, et cetera, that one of the problems they have, and I never really thought about, is, the people with unstable mental health that might come to you.
Oh, God.
Because I've met some very interesting people who tell me about all their health problems.
What time is it with you guys,
6:54 p.m.
6:54.
Okay, just making sure, because I didn't know if my computer had caught up. Yeah, sorry. Trying to make sure we're on track. We're doing well. We're good. Yeah.
But you're right, Karen. The mentally ill. Oh my God.
I tell people to go to therapists.
Therapist right away.
I mean, I think it's a moral. I think it's a moral not to. Like if somebody starts saying that they're seeing things and it's not in a spiritual context and it's a very clear
I
way.
went to a therapist for an entire year and then she had a nervous breakdown, so I don't ever want to hear about it again.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of psychology, really, modern psychology. Like I'm not a big fan of modern astrology. But, in today's vernacular, you've got to really say to somebody, I think you need mental health help. And
I think
say that,
There's so many people in that field nowadays. It really takes, unfortunately, a long time to also find the right person.
Mm-hmm.
But we're deviating from the subject of divination.
What's your next question, most gorgeous priestess?
We do. The fact that you've kept us on the subject.
She's been a great host.
She's
been
good.
one of the best interviewers because she keeps going well, let me ask you.
Let me ask you this and get you back on the subject matter. You think I've done this before? Maybe. Okay, what's my next question? Actually, this is a good one. This might be some lengthy answers. We've touched on it a little bit, but let's start with Levy on this. And Levy, I'm never going to do it right.
Stop saying it.
I know.
It's like the genes, honey.
Sorry.
You might as well tell them why it's freaking me out.
Back in many years ago, we used to play, you guys might know the game, it's called World of Warcraft. We used to play it pretty hardcore back in the day.
Leviathan.
And Brian's character was named Leviathan. So to this day, we have mutual friends together, and we still call him Levy. So it's a really
she always
hard
called me
habit.
Levy. So when I hear Levy from her, I feel like she's talking to me.
So, Levi, like the jeans, ma'am.
Levi.
Ooh, I'm going to put you in denim in my mind at all times.
But don't forget,
my denim was...
when Levi and I were traveling together and we're roommates, and it was Levi and Ellie and Levi, but we were all drinking wine, and it finally became Lely and Evi.
Lely and Evi.
I mean, or whatever. We couldn't do it anymore. Nobody could. They were like, they'd meet us new, and they were like, who are these two weird people that sleep in the same bed and call each other Levy and Eli, or Lely and Evi? We're like us weird people that slept in the same bed. King size
They were roommates.
King size bed. I know, we were roommates.
We were roommates.
We made the best videos.
We become one person. All right. Okay. Let's do this question because I like this question. This I'm actually curious about. Let's start with Levi here. Levi, your particular path in divination, when you started, was it a struggle or did it come relatively easily for you? Because some people find it's easy. Some people find it really hard. When you started.
I am a really gifted liar. And so I think
wow.
when I want to be. And so I think that was a problem when I was really young because I could convince myself almost or other people. Like I just kind of have the gift of gab. We all have our skills. And so I don't like lying, and I tend to try to be a very upright person. But I have a natural ability to fall into like people pleasing and being very talkative and trying to like kind of pull the wool over people's eyes. I don't really mean to do it maliciously, but it does get away from me every now and then when I'm like talking. I'm very verbal, and so I think it came very easily to me in a bad way, which is I can weave a story like nobody's business. Like if you give me a deck of cards and I lay them down, I can get you to tell me your secrets. You know what I mean? And that's what I often found was happening in divination is it wasn't a sacred thing for me when I was younger. It was me like, again, putting people in this like comfortable place, Southern queer man with the accent and everything. Like, they were like, let me tell you my secrets. And I think that that's not divination. I think that's just like a social skill. So like that came easily. Like, you can get your fruit flies to tell you all their dirty secrets. But I don't think that was real divination. So I would say when I actually apply myself and I started taking it more seriously, it was very difficult because I wasn't allowing myself to make those easy, quick, cheap kind of, social cues and all that. And it actually was a lot more difficult. It was a more serious project.
Wow.
That's a good answer.
Mm-hmm.
How about we go to Monsieur Brian for this one? When you first started your path as opposed to when you got more serious, did you have an easier time or was it harder?
Well, I think because I wouldn't consider divination to be like a major path of mine, it was easy. So for instance, I sort of I explored a little. I never went the route to the astrology. and I never will. I'm like, I've got astrologists. I've got astrologists in several covens in my life and people and in the shops. If I want astrology, I'm like, Levi, Ellie, do this for me. So I don't have that interest, and I don't want to do it. It looks too much like math. But tarot cards were something I started very early on in my early teens, and I really liked them. And got great success from them. And I think I've just, even though Levi won't like it, I think I'm naturally psychic or have an aptitude towards it, regardless of whether that's environmental, openness, insanity, whatever it is.
Insanity.
And I have to agree with Levi in a different angle. I have a certain level of charisma and what some might call the art of fascination, which can make reading professionally quite easy. So, an old friend of Christians used to say, sometimes being a psychic means knowing when to be psychic.
I love that.
Because you do have to sort of figure that out sometimes with certain clients, because a lot of clients will come to you and they want you to weave them a fairy tale. And it's actually very difficult. Is one of the reasons why I get very taxed by it, because I'm not really the kind of person who could do that and not have it hang on some level. Whereas I know people like Ellie, she keeps herself very fortified from other human beings at all times.
Very fortified.
If I did it again, I think I'd be more like that, but that's probably why. So I have to say easy, but I have to say that I never pushed, I studied runes, I studied the Ogham, I did all the forms of scrying, I did all those things. I didn't do astrology, lots of rituals and things like that. But I have to say tarot is my main thing, and I abandoned it for a while because I went through this phase that the whole craft went through where everything had to be Celtic. And the old occult tools of the craft had to be cast aside because they were too Christian, Yes. And so I went through a period of abandoning the tarot and then coming back to it, So I love tarot cards for multitudes of reasons, of the story that they tell. And I think storytelling is a very powerful ritualistic tool. But I don't consider myself a master divination person. I consider myself someone with a sight who uses it very selfishly. So I don't know if that even answers your question. Let's be.
That's a good answer. How about you, Ellie? Your path when you first started, was it easier or harder when you got more serious? I mean, some people are just like, oh, I'm just going to do this fun thing. And then Levi here, he got serious and it became much more difficult for him.
I think my story is a little backwards. I was a really strongly visual and auditory psychic as a really little child. And I was treated, medically and psychologically before kindergarten, at least looked at, for extreme stress, terror attacks. I was mute for a year. I couldn't be in a room by myself. I couldn't go outside alone. I had a severe visual and what I call severe visual and auditory psychism. So as I got a little older, my grandparents, my mother and my grandmother, took me to a psychic to get help because they had gone through every other way that they could figure out to get this kid functioning before we put her in the crazy house forever. And so it was a terrifying, very difficult time for me up until I was about 10, really. So when I started learning about tarot cards and that psychism was a thing and that there were tools to use, I grabbed onto that, and I was so thrilled that I could finally find some kind of structure, vocabulary, and way that was, in the public domain, and I could say, wait a minute, other people do this. It's not so weird, and I can use this tool to kind of structure what I'm seeing or ask certain things and then block and control a little bit better because I needed a framework. It was just like the Wild West as a little kid. I was a mind reader naturally, and I thought everyone else read my mind. So I had terror all the time, like in kindergarten. I was like, Jesus, this teacher's thinking that I think her butt's too big, just everything. And so
Ellie, as your magical working partner, I have to tell you, it's still the Wild West.
It's the Wild West. Yes. But in my mind, I feel much more structured and safe.
You're just Billy the Kid now. That's the only difference.
Robin trains. But it's the opposite for me. I found the training in psychic tools very helpful, and the structure really gave me something to hang on to. important. Yeah,
That makes
I can't
sense.
live without it, really, honestly. I love my tarot and my pendulum and my astrology. I just really need those things.
Yeah, often when I visit New Orleans, you're often in, Hex giving tarot readings. I've noticed that. I find it very interesting that you're almost always working in Hex when I go there, and it's only every other year.
That's my life. I just work at X and I do readings all the time.
She's
Yep.
constantly booked. When she's not reading for
Constantly.
clients, she's running the cult.
Yeah. When I'm not reading for
And when
clients,
she's not
I'm
running
saying,
the cult, she's growing magical herbs.
Yeah.
She does live a witch's life.
I do
100%.
live a 100% witch's life, and I'm so thankful that I have the freedom to do it comfortably. I am.
Isn't it wonderful?
Wonderful.
Especially nowadays, we have so much more freedom than we did when we were younger. It's so
when
wonderful.
I was younger, I wanted to say that absolutely. When I was raising my young child in the South, I mean, I was not publicly like I am today. Not at all. I'm thrilled.
no.
I'm thrilled to be where I am today. I'm absolutely thankful.
Yeah,
And I always have to say, I don't believe in hereditary witches, but there are a couple groups of women that I'm like, well, these ones are a bit weird. So Ellie's mother and her daughter and her are like a triad of some kind of a magical psychic witchcraft sort of thing. They're
Somehow,
all
I think
very
it's true.
magical, wonderful people. And your mom, we've always known about your mom.
Yeah, right.
That's true.
Diana.
Oh
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
My
I'm
mother
talking
is,
about
I think,
Susan.
touched too.
Susan.
I don't even
Susan
know.
My
always
mother-
said she's just an earth worshiper.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Brian. My mother's, she's very special. I didn't grow up with religion myself. I really didn't. I grew up with a tiny bit of Episcopalianism, just a little nudge,
Like most
enough to give me a
Episcopalians.
moral. Yeah, just
Just the right amount. Just a little bit of it.
It's like the most.
and it was, and that's about all I had. It was all the formal education as far as Jesus was considered. So my mother was so plant orientated. She lived, eat, and breathed dirt. So I am absolutely 100% positive that my mother, the Sayer, was probably either a witch in a past life or very much is a witch and restricted herself from the knowledge because it was
She
scary.
was always very
was
supportive of
understandable.
everything we did. Both of our mothers were very supportive of
Yeah.
us. But never criticized, almost kind of weirdly proud. You know?
Yeah.
My mom too.
Yeah, my mother was extremely supportive, still is, still asks me questions, and she's 78 years old. She's like, who you believe in now?
Your mom too.
So
Levi.
No,
Your
she's
mom
very
too.
supportive.
We do have supportive moms.
Yeah, we
Thankfully.
did. Was
Oh,
that-
that's great. I'm so happy. All of our mothers.
Now let's talk about our fathers.
Let's not talk about our daddies.
What's your
I
next
have a
question
father-in-law
before we
in
go
that
down
work.
daddy issues?
We definitely probably all have daddy issues.
All right, so a
I'm
couple more.
sure I
do
have
a couple
daddy
more
issues.
good
I think
questions.
I still have daddy issues in more than one way, Master Levi.
Well, hello, Daddy. Hello, Daddy.
Karen, I'm
Every
begging
time you say that, I expect you to pull out a lightsaber.
What is your next question, Karen?
All right. I'll start with, actually, Brian, on this one. Do you think there was ever a time in your life where you relied too much on divination?
I mean, maybe. I mean, I have to
That's
say
kind of a
no, but then there were 2 years where I supported myself with it. So I don't know the answer to that. Like, you mean when I was paying all my bills through that, maybe?
Well,
Um,
maybe.
No,
well, some
I don't
people-
think so. No, I don't think so because I've never been obsessive about that sort of thing. You know, my obsessions were always fear-based and not in that way. You know, more like, you know, I had a mother. Let's get into therapy. Divination. So I had a mother who I love, but she was, I don't know, like some sort of kind of like I am, a British old lady with a touch of like Italian neuroticism, to where she, you know, if you said, "Mom, I'm going to go swimming, don't drown," you know. So I had that sort of instinctual like survival mode thing going on, but I didn't sit there worrying about what was going to happen in the future. I was always very brave in the face of the future. I think I still am. So when I think about the future for myself, it's always more for fun and curiosity. I think I use divination more as strategizing because I'm very well aware that I'm driving the bus as much as possible. You know, some things I do think are fate, and then you have to just realize it's out of your hands, right?
Yeah.
So that's a bit. I don't know if that really answers the question, but no, I don't think so, really. No, I don't think so.
That's a good answer. How about Levi this time? Do you think there was ever a time in your life where you relied too much? I mean, like, is it going to give me all the answers? Sort of reliance.
I think I was saved from this because the forms of divination I love are quite fatalistic in a way. Particularly traditional astrology, it's like, it's not really...
You're doomed anyway.
Yeah, exactly. You're born under a bad star, honey. Like, it's all... One of my favorite things about traditional astrology when I was doing all the research for the Art Cosmic is you would crack open some of these old astrology manuals from the early modern period, like late Renaissance. And it would just say, like, you would look up a conjunction or something, and it would just be like, will die of dropsy.
Death by fire.
Death by fire. God. Like, murdered by lover. Yes. Like, adulterer. It's just very black and white. It's very fatalistic, kind of doom and gloom in a great cosmic kind of way that I love. So I don't think I think that saves you a little bit from that when you do allow some room for fate, right? Like, you're not God. Some things are going to happen that you can't control. That's life. And I think that's a very necessary, and I've always had that. I have never really been a good New Ager. I can't sit around and talk about, don't give me no negative vibes because I'm manifesting on my higher plane of existence. So that I just can't do that. I'm just always like, God's got a plan to kill us all, to quote a character from sitcom Mom. It's the character, I forget that actress's name. My husband loves her, but she's a character on the sitcom Mom, and they're at an AA meeting or something, and she says something, if you think about it, God's got a plan to kill us all. And you just keep that in mind, children, and you'll be fine.
You'll be fine.
You won't get addicted to the tarot cards. You won't get addicted to the tarot cards if you realize, well, it's all going to end in flames anyway. Like, the Great Mother will swallow this universe and recreate us all.
My favorite, to interject on Levi, my favorite thing that happened once was that I had put him in charge when he was still in training of doing something tarot in the coven. And one of the things he said to all of us, if you get the death card, someone's going to die.
Yes.
I'd still read it that way. I hate how we took that away from it. Now it's not about death; it's about transformation.
But I think you're kind of right, really.
Death, it's over.
There's 72 cards in a tarot deck, and they're supposed to say everything that's going to happen in a human life. One of them should be about death. I think it might be the one called death.
78 cards.
Yeah,
you said 72.
I said 72. 78. Sorry. 78. Yeah. But,
so fatalistic to the core, I said 72,
really, though, don't you? I love that.
So sort of
well, I've met people who use their tools as crutches, and I'm always fascinated by that. And I kind of feel sorry for them.
They're crazy. They need to go to a therapist.
You'll know you're doing it to yourself when you do your reading for yourself, and then you don't like it, so you pick them
Shuffle
up.
them and do it again.
Yes.
We've all done it in our younger days.
Yep.
That wasn't right.
Brian used to call me the Prophet of Doom. That used to be what he called me.
I love
Whenever
that.
I would do reading stuff or teach tarot.
But
the Prophet of Doom.
You forgot that I've changed that to the Duchess of Doom.
Nobody's remembering that. It's not happening. It's not sticking.
Everyone remember. Everyone, please let Levi know. You know he's the Duchess. He's gonna have those pearls.
I'll accept Prophet
I've got
of Doom.
my pearls on today, and my Isis pearls today.
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna dedicate my next book to you.
To the Duchess.
The Duchess of Doom. Then it'll be immortalized.
What about you, Ellen?
My answer is funny. I've not been obsessed with divination except in one case, and I don't know how I got introduced to the I Ching or what age I was. It must have been in my 20s. The old, is it Bollinger? Hardback copy of the I Ching, and you get the, I used the 6 pennies or the 3 pennies. I didn't use the sticks, heads or tails. And I was just learning about it, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And I was crazy for about a year and a half. I called it I I Chinged out. I mean, and that's exactly what Brian says. I would read it, and I would say, oh, that's stupid. Do it again. Cast those pennies again. Write down that hexagram. Oh, that's ridiculous.
You can go down some rabbit holes with
I I Chinged like 16 or 17 or 20 times a day until I was just crazy. And I was like, all right, Ellie, this is not a tool for you. Put this away.
Put it away.
I love I Ching. I think it's the idea about it's a totally Eastern mindset. It's not my genetic mindset, if we can use that kind of terminology. And I love it. I still use it occasionally today, but it got a hold of me and really took me down a rabbit hole. It did.
So this is sort of just going a little bit off your answer and proof that the wine and sleep deprivation kicked in. But my grandmother, I always find this fascinating story. I don't have any family witch stories, and I think that most family witch stories are what I'm actually about to say. So I had a grandmother who was supposed to be very psychic, and she read playing cards. Mm-hmm. And I never knew her. She died before I was born, but apparently she read it religiously every day, the playing cards for everything. Yeah. But she was supposed to be very psychic.
Instead of soap operas, instead of gossip and soap operas, like I could do it. I could dig into people's personal lives all day long and find out tons of information. Sometimes I do that, but yeah, I think it was a tool we could have used when we didn't have Facebook. And now we've got Facebook. We can,
you don't even need the tarot cards.
Geek out on Facebook.
Don't creep on them.
Yeah, they'll just tell you. People tell you all their stuff now. It doesn't even matter.
Mm-hmm.
I know my husband does. Like, if you want to know who my husband is, go read his wall. It's all on there.
Right.
No secrets.
No secrets.
Okay, Miss Karen.
I have. All right. Well, those are actually really, really good answers, because I have myself, I've never gotten caught up in the need for divination, the desire for it. So I always find it interesting, because I had a friend who was hooked on tarot for a while, and I'm like, they were literally doing reading after reading for themselves, and I'm like, honey, this is becoming a crutch.
Right.
You can't continue doing this.
Who is this?
Oh, a person I used to know years ago, a guy
names.
named Eric. No, it was you didn't know him. It was a guy named Eric I knew years ago, and he wasn't very good at it either, unfortunately. He wasn't very well trained, and that was an issue. But he would do it over and over and over, and I'd be like, you're just doing this seeking for an answer, and eventually if you get it, you're going to enjoy it, but if you don't get it, you're just going to keep looking for the answer. Mm-hmm. And that's, those kind of people are looking for crutches, an answer specifically.
What round of questions are we on, Karen? What number are we on?
Oh, I don't know, because I renumbered them at one point in time. I think we're about at number, I think that was actually number 7. So technically
Number
those
7.
are our 7.
All right. So what I'll do is I'll start the queue now, and then you can ask another question while we're doing that. So if you're interested in calling in to ask us any questions about this subject or anything Alexandrian, anything witchcraft, about, who does Ellie's hair, whatever, please call 309-GODDESS. We love to hear from you, put you on, have a conversation with you. We love it. It's our favorite thing. Levi loves answering the phones. So go ahead,
Yay.
Call, get in the queue, and we'll start answering those for the last 30 minutes of the show. But we're going to let Karen use this last 15 minutes to get one more question in. We'll just try to be sort of brief in our answers.
Sure.
If we get questions. If we get questions, Levi, tell us we've got people.
Yeah, and we'll go through the chat too, like we always do.
Yeah. So 309-GODDESS. And if you do the chat, we just know you're weaker than the people that call in.
Ooh, burn.
Vicious.
18th century.
Or you have a really horrible sounding voice.
Also acceptable.
Or you're not who you say you are.
Also probable.
Okay, Darth Sith.
Okay, Miss Karen, what is your next question?
This is we can chit chat about it because it's kind of an extended question. What benefits do you think divination brings you in your life? It's a hard question, but what real benefits?
I mean, money.
Who are you asking first?
Sorry, Levi. What benefits do you think divination will bring to you in your life, other than just maybe knowledge of others, because that's kind of a given? That's a hard question.
I think it's a very useful tool for mindfulness and ritual. I think for a lot of people, they're interested in something spiritual. They're hungry for something religious, but they were raised in a sort of lackluster Christian environment or a secular household. They don't really know where to go, and a deck of tarot cards or learning astrology. But, these kind of things are really useful. They will give you a framework of reference. They will speak in a language you still understand. You will know the archetypes of the tarot, because even if you're not Christian, you were raised in Christendom. So what a pope is, what a knight in shining armor is. They speak in a language that makes sense to people with European ancestry. I'm not saying that you can't use them if you don't have that. I'm just saying it's easily understandable. It gives you a framework of reference. And a lot of people who are entering into alternative spirituality, I hate that term, but non-standard religion of your area, they're really hungry for some sort of framework. So I think it gives you that. I think it gives you a place, a vocabulary.
That's a good. Yeah, it's good. Brian, for you, when you do divination, what benefits do you think it brings about in your daily life?
I don't do it daily, other than sometimes, I guess, just having the site. But magical strategies, as I've already told you, that's probably the most benefit. I think sometimes in a more holistic way, because you're asking for information. So I think sometimes the powers that be put the truth in your face that you don't want to see. So in that sense, I think that it's beneficial. Because what I've noticed is the few times that I was knocking on the door and asking for something and being given the information, but for whatever reason I didn't want to pass it along or whatever, and it was an actual divine thing going on, then that's when the dreams will kick in, and all that sort of stuff. So it's like, it's there for you to see, but you're asking for wisdom. That's what you're asking for. So it's beneficial when it occurs, even if you don't like it.
Absolutely. Ellie, how about you? What benefits do you think it brings you on a daily basis, even if you don't do it daily?
I do read, I read professionally 3 days a week solidly, so it's kind of gotten to be like this pattern. Like for years and years ago, I worked at a bar for a year as a bartender, and it was back in the day when you could smoke inside, and I'm not a cigarette smoker at all. So I worked like the weekend shifts, but on Wednesday I had to just go back into that bar and like breathe some air to get my nicotine fix, because I was addicted to secondhand smoke. I didn't know, but I was like, God, I got to go to the Z and get breathe the air. So I think part of it is like habitual. I read a lot. So when I grab my cards and I sit down, one thing I really want to add about this, I think it's a very strong tool to get control over your own mind, just like meditation. Focus, blocking out the external, ability to concentrate on something for sometimes an hour at a time. I have clients I read for an hour at a time. So I can't get up and go to the bathroom or pick my nose or say, hey, I want to take 5 minutes. I have to stay powerfully, mentally in charge of my being, energetically in charge of myself when I'm on duty. And I really love the skills of that structure and that power over myself to concentrate, focus, and do something very hard and specific for more, 8 hours a day. When I'm reading, it's 8 hours, and I'm mostly reading for the whole 8 hours. In my personal life, I just think it's grounding, and it makes me feel connected to my gods, and it makes me feel comfortable and safe, and it's a habit. Like cigarette smoking, maybe, right, Levi? Or drinking my glass of wine at Covendom, because I'm always nervous and I feel like the wine makes me feel a little bit more at ease. So, yeah, it's just like being a wino.
I felt like being drunk and tired would be more interesting than just being tired.
I know. I love that. I love that idea.
I was like, what am I going to do? I still drink. That's fine.
So, we don't have a caller right now. We have some questions back in the chat that I can go back to. Or if
Boo! Boo!
Jesus, Brian.
I wouldn't mind at least one question from the chat.
Sure.
I'd like to hear one.
They're a little controversial, but it'll be fun. Yeah. So Shane asked earlier about mediumship. A whole debate kind of sprung up in the chat, between a lot of people about talking to the dead. And the question was, what are you actually talking to?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question, because going back to something you touched on earlier, I can't quite remember what you said, but you said we don't really talk to the ancestors. We talk to the memory of. And for me, that's a kind of a harder one, because somewhere in my brain, I have a hard time deviating the ghost of a person, because I know that person isn't there. And this is my personal belief. I know that sentient person isn't there anymore. And I think you're right. I think what's left over is mostly memories and attachments to things. And when we talk to our ancestors, we end up talking most of the time to memories. But that's okay, because that's what we want. We want those ancestral memories coming back, and that's the whole purpose of talking to them. But I mostly agree, actually, with you and what you said on that we don't really... I have issues with the whole ghost as non-corporeal, sentient, I'm talking to you thing. I just don't think that's plausible. It would be wonderful, but not plausible. I think things are more thought forms or emotional things left behind. But that's just me.
What about you, Brian? When you think people talk to the dead, what do they
from
talk
my own personal experience, I have had communications from what I guess we would call ghosts, but not in an audio sense. So I can't say they were really talking to me. However, I believe my mother has heard her name called. And in fact, she was working in a place that had a long history of being haunted, and different women that had worked there had heard this entity calling their name, which is a part that to me dictates that there is a consciousness going on to be able to learn a name and do it. And I believe my mom, because my mom is not in any of this stuff, and she's very psychic. So I do believe it occurs. I don't claim to, as a witch, I believe in reincarnation, but I don't necessarily know when it happens, why it happens, or how it happens. And I don't claim to. But, for the most part, I do think, I'm agreeing with everything said. But for sometimes, I think this spirit that, for instance, in this case that lingered on, he had died alone. He was an old vet at this vet clinic, and he died alone, unmarried, and only was reaching out to women. So I think that there was some sort of sad lingerness, and it was still a vet clinic. So I think he was sort of still living his old life in some way.
His
but
emotions,
I think that in terms of sometimes it's, think about it. So only to the living does time matter. Time is round the way we see it. So I think, when your parents die or your grandparents, I always think that's like a waiting room for them to wait for your death. So I think it's more likely people that knew you are going to like come check you out or whatever, if that's possible. If they've got things to do. I've had communications that make me believe that the dead can have consciousness, but not in my ears. Like I haven't had somebody talking to me and telling me a story. However, I had images. I did a mediumship once for this woman, and I believed it must have been good because what I came up with was completely insane. And she was asking me about a friend of hers who had died. And she said, does she have any messages for me? And I said, I don't know why, but all I'm getting is you dressed up like the good witch from The Wizard of Oz. And that's the image she's sending me. And she started laughing and crying because she said, and I don't see why the lady would lie to me about it, that her friend used to like to pull pranks. And one of the pranks she did once was to say they were going to a Wizard of Oz Halloween party when nobody else was dressed up. So she showed up dressed up like this as the prank. And so her friend was sending her a message through me saying, yes, I'm here and I hear you. But I didn't hear it. I saw it, So I do believe in those kind of communications, but I'm not obsessed with them. I don't live my life through that. I don't personally seek it out, and I do not try to talk to dead people.
Yeah.
I try not to talk to living people.
I love that.
Brian has a low patience for the flesh and blooded.
Right.
I'll answer and then I'll pass it.
I don't know if I really answered the question though, Levi.
You did.
That's what I got.
Christian put something in the chat I agree with.
These are excellent answers.
Yeah. Christian said something in the chat I agree with, which is that, beyond death, time is not linear, which Brian hit on too.
Right.
Sentience can exist on different levels. And, he has this lovely argument that he put in the chat about, not argument, but, point about, that it's possible that something could reincarnate and still yet exist because there's multiple timelines and all that. Yes.
The Egyptians believe that.
Yeah, multiple souls.
Yes.
There's multiple souls. So I definitely think that's a possibility. Mm-hmm. My personal hang-up is twofold. One, I've been around this world for quite some time now, and before that, the only form of occultism that kind of gained ground and became wildly popular in America, in rural America, was spiritualism. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There weren't a lot of Rosicrucians running around in rural communities.
No Rosicrucians.
But there were a lot of committed people.
Table tippers.
Some people who were committed to my aunt can talk. You go talk to her. She'll take care of you. Mm-hmm. I have never seen it be, and this is a personal belief, and I know that I'm stepping on some toes here. It's a personal belief of mine. I've never seen it be super healing if it's repeated. A one-off where you kind of live out your grief at a seance or whatever can be very beautiful. Repeatedly going to a medium to talk to a dead relative, I think, is not always psychologically healthy.
Right.
I think it's usually a sign of I think it's a sign of somebody who's not worked through their grief.
Codependence or other problems.
Which is how
too.
spiritualism was born. You know, it was born after World War I.
Mm-hmm.
It was born at a time when there was loss on a scale that we had never really experienced.
Right.
People did not have answers. They were desperate to get over their grief. So I understand why it sprang up. I will say I have been a lot of people don't know this about me, used to be really big into spiritualism and run seances when I was young. My experience with that is why I don't really love it anymore, because it seemed to hurt people more than heal, because they couldn't let go of the dead. And the second thing I'll say is, out of the probably hundreds, if not over 1,000 sittings I've been in, I have never seen somebody reveal information that could not be gathered from social media or public knowledge, ever.
Or from the mind of the client.
Ever. I have never seen anyone deliver something from the dead that could not be known by the living. And so that's why I say that I think it's memory and not a separate intelligence.
I get that. Good answer, guys. Very good answers.
What about you, Miss Ellie?
I could talk about that for a few hours because of my job, I've had to do it a lot, and I didn't really have a good framework of training in mediumship or seance work. I kind of tried to call out to other psychics and Levi and say, well, help me, what do I do here? I agree with Christian. I don't think the human physical brain and mind understand time and space in the multiverse the way it may actually operate. Sure. So to use words like in the past, in the future, to me are kind of nebulous. Like I don't really do that as much as I'm talking about in the full spectrum of what's possible. The way I describe the soul to my clients is as a faceted diamond that is a beautiful spark of light that is cut on many sides, and that I'm asking to see the face of that crystal that is the last personality of the person, Uncle Bob, that my client wants to see. But I ask my clients, do you want me to check on that person? Do you want me to look at their soul? And in all my mediumship work, I ask my guides, take me to the soul of the person, and then show me the last personality that this client is seeking. So I have had better and better success. The more I practice, I certainly have gotten better with it. I think there's a lot of psychological issues with doing mediumship. Just like Levi said, there's a lot of pain and agony. And, usually when someone's really hurt by a person, their mother, their father abandoned them and then die, and then the person's thinking, they're going to really tell me they love me and I was meaningful and this was all, my whole life experience was wrong. No, that soul says, I didn't like them when they were living and I don't like them now. Okay, I don't like them. They're crappy. Even one guy told me once, and it was a horrible story, I'm not going to repeat it, right in the mediumship, he said, you tell my mother I hate that more than I ever have, and I do not love her, and I do not want to participate in this at all. So I'm sitting there in my booth thinking,
was he there?
Well, I'm thinking, what do I do to this lovely lady? Or not, she wasn't lovely. I knew I didn't like her. I was like, she was really horrible, but I didn't know what to say. I was in a really tight spot, so I had to say to the spirit silently, I just call it the spirit, I can't say that to her in this context. This is a paid reading. I can't do it. And he said, well, make some shit up then, because I don't like her and I'm never going to like her. Period. So you don't always get these beautiful answers of love and healing. But here's what I want to say. I have done cases of suicide and murder, and I've actually worked with local police on these cases. I've had a detective call our general manager, Kaylin, to verify that I'm a psychic working in a shop and that don't need to be investigated as the murderer because of the facts I knew about a crime. My client, and I did this during the COVID time, and it was a really heinous murder. My client did not know about the death she knew the sister was murdered at gunpoint, but they knew very little about this case. She heard about me, she called me, she set up a phone reading, and I said, I'm going to show you what I'm all I can do is tell you what I'm seeing. Tell me the name of the sister and your name, and I'm going to tell you what I see. I asked to see the scene, and I described the murderer, the car, the way the shooting happened, the disposal of the gun. But I don't know these people, so this is very abstracted. I can tell you what they're wearing, what kind of car it was, what color, four-door, etc., small handgun, how the woman was shot, what part of the body she was shot. And so that lady took all that. She recorded the session. She took it to the detective, because I said, take this to the detective. The person who died was her sister. Take this to the detective. Later that week, the detective called the shop to verify who I was. And he asked if he could call me directly. And I said, of course. And he did. And we had a long conversation. He said, we're about to make the arrest. The information you gave us could be not known by no one except two people, the victim and the murderer. And your description of the car and the woman is exactly what we needed to tie it to these cell phone pings that we got on a burner phone. And I don't really understand this stuff, but I'm just like, okay, fine. So they made the arrest, and I found out later they convicted the murderer. It was a relative. So that client didn't know that scenario that I'm talking to. So I'm not reading the client's mind. I viewed it as what we may call remote viewing or distant viewing, where I'm asking to see, and this may not be the right term at all. I call that the Akashic record. Like, I call it the imprint, that energy leaves an imprint, and that if you're able or skilled in certain ways, you can see that imprint. So I've done a lot of suicide cases. I really don't like doing them. They're very emotionally heavy. And that's Kaylin answering. I have to explain that Ellie was a psychic and this was a Louisiana detective. We do have a call, by the way. Okay, so we got a call. So who knows?
But I want to next. So the third caller tonight, 309 Goddess. So we're trying to get calls. So the third caller tonight gets a free
reading with Ellie?
Phone mediumship with Christian Day.
Oh, good, Christian Day. Not me.
Third caller tonight gets a
he might have something to say about that.
Half-hour mediumship with Christian
because Day. He literally is about to be on the phone.
Okay, who? What's our first call? Hello, caller.
I knew it was him being psychic.
Christian,
but I'm not the third caller.
No, you're not. So you don't get the free reading.
I knew it was you calling, so I was being.
Yeah, but I'm not giving out I don't be giving out my talents.
He will. He'll
Wait a minute. This is going to go off the rails.
My days are selling my pussy for $1 or over.
You can't say
so
that on
anyway.
Here.
Okay, be good. What's your question, Christian?
I'll be good at it. Well, it's not so much a question. You went to spiritualism.
It's supposed to be a question. That's what you're supposed to be doing here. You're calling with a question. We didn't invite you to be a guest speaker. What's your question?
I don't have a question.
Unless you agree to the mediumship, then I'll let you debate.
Huh?
Let him ask. I'm actually genuinely curious.
I'm genuinely curious, Christian. What did you want to know?
All right, go.
Well, what I wanted to say was the most accurate mediumship I ever saw in my life was at a spiritualist church, and it was also the least accurate mediumship I ever saw in my life at that same meeting. One lady got up at the pulpit, looked out at a guy that must have been 100 years old and said, "You there, you knew a Charlie once." Probably knew every Charlie in the phone book.
Yeah.
But I was there with this born-again Christian lady who I went to school with, and she was, really fond of weirdly exploring the New Age stuff, and we'd go to classes at Pyramid Books and what have you. And we went to this spiritualist church, and the guy's looking out at me, or the lady, up at the thing, and she starts talking about how I had this close friend that died in violence, and all these things were, they found him alone, and literally all these specifics that made absolutely no sense to me. And so I come out, and the lady from school that I went to school with, started describing all of this stuff that happened to her boyfriend, and found, how they found him dead and all of this. And then, so of course, if it was something somebody would have Googled, they would have looked right out at me. They wouldn't have just, who does this relate to? And what was really weird about it, and why I think it came to me, was because the boyfriend that was murdered was living on the first floor of the apartment building that my mother and I were staying in at the time with Angel's grandmother. And so I wasn't in the house when he was murdered, but I was only away for a day with my father. I was actually living there at the time that this guy was murdered. And how could this lady, there were so many details, including the date, not the date, but the month. No, actually I take that back. It was the date, the actual date and the month that this guy died. And if they had just Googled that, well, wouldn't they have just directly spoken to her? And how would they know we were coming? You know what I mean? Well, first of all, this was in
stuff definitely does
19.
happen.
Sure.
This was in 1989. There wasn't no Google.
Now,
you know what I mean? There was
I have to say this because this is my worst nightmare. We actually do not allow callers to do this. He's only getting away with it because he's my husband. We do not want you coming on here. This isn't your show. This is our show. Call with questions.
But we give preference.
But he's upstairs and he knows where
he's upstairs in the house where Brian is, so there could be violence. But no, Christian, thank you for the story. I respect it.
I don't
Did
get
you
it.
have a
What's the
question?
point of it? What's the point of it? That you think mediumship is real?
I think he's trying to make a point that he's had an experience where it was.
Yes,
Okay.
and he was
All right.
contradicting what I said, where
trying
it
to
comes
make
from
the
social
point
media.
because Levi mentioned the spiritualist church, and that was actually
Yeah.
where
But he's gonna go off of his experiences, just like any good scientist.
And it's one of the reasons anytime any of the
He's not
psychics
dead
work
yet.
for us want to learn.
You've said
I
that.
know, Christian.
Train at the
You've said that
spiritualist
before.
church.
Train with the spiritualist
you've
churches.
said that many times.
I think they're.
Yeah.
I just
Well,
can't
thank
find
you.
one. Not
You're very
here.
welcome. Blessed
Bye.
be.
Thank you. Where I have to say this, and this is just my personal thing, I 100% believe in conscious spirits. I don't necessarily know why they exist sometimes and not others.
Right.
But the reality of it is, I don't care. I have no interest.
Here's the thing. I'm going to be really blunt.
Unless I knew them.
I can't say how I really feel because it would hurt. It would cause too many ripples, like in this community.
Yeah.
Okay, you know somebody was murdered. Okay, that's great. Why couldn't you contact the dead and stop the murder? If the information is just useless,
Right.
like after effects, then I find it sort of like, where were you on September the 10th? It's like, where are all these mediums? Before
Ahead of time
on September 10th. It's just a tacky thing to sort of like claim a knowledge that could save lives and then say, well, not really. It depends when the spirit moves me. It's like, well, how useful.
Well, there's the other end of it, Levi, is no one would listen anyway.
Yeah.
So even when or if it has happened, nobody would listen.
If you were right once or twice, they would. All it would take is once or twice.
Maybe back in the day they listened, but not anymore.
And it's like, so that's the thing that irritates me about it is just like, I think it dangerously lets people sort of get this weird, and I'm not saying, I know Ellie doesn't do this, but I'm saying a lot of spiritualists.
The lady that, we've turned this into a debate, but I'm being a devil's advocate. You'll know who it
I'm
is.
happy.
So I'm kind of plugging this in. That woman who was arrested during World War II, she was arrested by the British government, and it was under the crime of witchcraft that they used as the reason. But the reason they arrested her is because they thought she was a German spy because she had secret information about things that had happened to U-boats that no one should have known. And they arrested her and detained her because they thought she was a freaking spy because the information she had was so accurate. So, I absolutely believe that, that's not the same thing as spirits, but it kind of goes along the same way. I think where we can all agree, because everyone has been saying this, Ellie, me, Levi, Christian, probably the people in the chat, Karen, is that we believe in these things, but none of us claims to actually know the formula.
Right. Or the whole truth.
And
Karen,
I don't
you
claim
can
to know it either. I don't know why some spirits feel the need to hang around and talk to people. My basic experience on that is it's ones that they're never happy. They're never, they're never telling you anything you need to know. My personal communications with spirits that I knew, it was just a hello.
Yeah.
It was I'm okay, you're okay, hello, goodbye.
Yeah. Me too.
And that happened a couple of times, and it was through symbols and dreams and things. It wasn't.
Yeah.
I didn't hear anything, unfortunately, but I did have it. Yeah.
Karen, if you want to mute yourself for a break, you totally can. Yes, Miss Kaylin let me know that you were going to take a quick one. So, yes, as she takes a quick little break,
So once again, 309 Goddess, Christian will do.
No, he will not.
The third caller. He will do.
We do have a call.
So who do you think's in charge around here, really?
I know. We have a call. Hi, you're on the air.
Hi, I love you guys. I love you, Brian.
Hello, who's
Can
this?
you hear me? Hi.
We can hear you.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
Because you were talking about tarot reading, and I've been doing this a long time. I you know me from the BMC way back when you first opened. But anyway, my mother dies on July 10th. I go and have my mystic fair here because I moved back to Ohio to take care of her, and she passed away. So in a dream or in a consciousness, she says, I'm taking you kids with me. So then I go and I have a friend of mine, just out of curiosity, read a card for me. And she pulls the card and says, there's 4 siblings, and you're looking over the coffin. 7 days later, my brother dies. So am I just hearing my consciousness of thinking Mom loved us so much she wants us near her? Or is she going to take us all away? I mean, it's like she was born with a veil over her face, so she's always been intuitive. You couldn't get away with anything in my house because she knew it before it was going to happen.
I'm going to give this one.
How long has she been dead?
But
how long has she been dead?
She died July 10th.
This year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And she whispered, I felt her whisper straight in my ear, I'm just going to take you kids with me. And then my brother dies 7 days later.
So, Miss Ellie, what would you...
I think she hated all of you.
No, Brian. Not true.
I mean, is that normal? Is that, like, because I've been...
Definitely not normal.
Forever.
Definitely not normal.
Okay, so Ellie, you take this one real quick.
I don't know what she meant. I don't know. I think that when you're close to death, you're probably more psychic because you're closer to the energy shift. And so maybe your mom was more psychic as she was passing away. And she knew that your brother was going to be passing away also, sort of as a psychic. I mean, if she was born with the call, that really is a strong folk story that you are more psychic when the call is over you.
Yeah, I feel...
But I think... So how many
like
siblings are there? What number are you?
There's 4 of us.
And is your brother the oldest?
There's 4.
The brother that died the oldest?
Yes.
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 Who's the next oldest?
My other brother, who actually has been dying for 10 years of, issues. He's had a half a lung taken.
Yep.
He's got all kinds of issues.
He'll die next.
But
then the next youngest, then the baby will die last.
Ellie.
Well, sorry.
I'm hoping I live a long time.
Are you the last one?
But she always knew what I was thinking, and we always knew things. She was like a mamba. She would study voodoo so much, and she was excited the fact that at 16 in New Orleans, I wanted to be a witch. I wanted to practice. I wanted to study everything. So she knew she could talk to me and always tell me things. But it's like, did she leave and pass on so she could meet with my brother and take him to cross over, or did she really want to take us all?
I don't know. That's a psychic question. I feel like you guys were all actually pretty close and probably knew each other in past lives, and so there's a stronger connection there. I actually will say that I think it was a real love from your mother to you all, and she was saying, don't worry about when you pass on. I'll be here. I'm going first. I'm going to get on the rope swing first and jump off the rocks into the lake, and then I'll be in the water when you guys come in. I think that was really her message, and I would take it as comfort.
Agreed.
I'm thinking, but it was just kind of, I've never seen that happen in my life. Of that, like,
well, we're all going to die.
We're all going to die. That's definitely my thought.
Either she was threatening you because she didn't like you all very much, or she was prophesying and it's going to come to pass, or she was just not well. But you're going to die when you're going to die anyway. So let's just leave it to fate.
Leave it to fate. But thank you for calling.
We were all super close, and we were very.
Sorry, I dropped because we have one more. I want to make sure we get everybody. Also,
this will be the one that gets a reading from Christian.
Yeah,
for 30 minutes.
Right. The third
No, it won't. He will not give a mediumship reading to someone.
Oh, if it sounds like a hot gay guy, he will.
Anyway, I was going to let everyone know, if you're calling in, there's an auto screener where you can speak a message that's transcribed for us. We do request you do that. Somebody did get disconnected earlier. Not the person who just called, but somebody who called.
And let's not forget to include Karen in the question.
Yes. So
she's back from
I have 2
peeing
calls
now.
processing right now. We have quite a few.
Oh, goody. Let's go.
Okay.
They all wanted a reading from Christian. Does he still love
Hi,
me?
can you hear me?
Hi,
Hi, who's this?
it's Charlene.
Hi, Charlene. What's your question?
Yeah, ever since I lived where I live currently, I had a close connection with this lady, Anne. When I moved in, she turned 99, and she just passed on July 3rd at 108.
Wow.
And
Long life.
there was some very interesting things between us. For example, one
Charlene,
day,
I do not mean to cut you off at all, but we are almost out of time. Do you have a question, Charlene?
Yeah. Why did I know? I called the nursing home the night before to check on her, and then the next day she passed on. And then, like 3 or 4 years ago, I asked all of her family that was visiting her, does anyone know her middle name? Because she's not giving it up, and nobody knew it. And I said, I bet it's Eleanor. And she said, how did you know that? I just had this really special connection with her. And so I just wondered, if you had any thoughts about that,
Well, that's not really a question, and we're not doing readings.
No, I'm going to drop this
readings
call,
right
and I'm
now.
going to go ahead and make 2 pronouncements, and I don't care if it makes me seem rude. I just went through a death, and so I'm just kind of in a bad mood about this. Number 1, I don't want to hear your death stories. That's not a question. It's just you sharing something too personal for a web show. And number 2, this is not Call a Psychic. So if you're here to tell us your cool story about how you spoke to the dead, save it for someone who believes. Hi, is this Jennifer?
Hi, you guys. It is.
Hi, how are you?
Good. You guys all look great. I'm such a fan of the show.
I'm so glad.
Thank you.
What's your question, Jennifer?
My question is about a friend who recently passed away, and I felt like I was trying to reach out to him, and he came in my dream and gave me a kiss. And I'm sorry, I've been drinking a little bit tonight, guys. So.
Hello.
I love the
I'm kind of fangirling out because I'm on the show. I'm a little bit nervous.
Shout out to the honesty, though. Thank you, Jennifer. So you had this
Yeah.
experience, and what's your question about this experience?
So I was just wondering if, is that just my mind, doing that, or was that real?
We
Karen?
couldn't really tell you.
I know, but okay, I'm going to give it to Karen since she hasn't got to do one yet. What do you think, Karen?
Well, it could be a combination of both, honestly. People go through many different cycles of grief, and we don't even fully realize we're going through all these cycles as we go through them. So it could be him speaking to you, but my guess would probably be a combination of your grief a little bit and possibly him speaking. But honestly, we really couldn't tell you for sure. Just death is a
Karen
really
thinks you're probably crazy.
No, she doesn't.
Yeah,
Karen
no.
has one guess.
No, I do believe that part of. I currently have a friend who's dealing with he's never really dealt with his mother's death, and he's still going through it 25 years later. So grief is a very interesting thing, and sometimes we can think we hear what people's. Honestly, our opinion doesn't matter. That's the skinny of it.
That's right.
Our opinion doesn't matter. We weren't there for the event. You were.
Mm-hmm.
The only opinion that truly matters is yours and
Correct,
what you think.
I would
of
agree
it.
with that. I think that's a great answer.
Because it's not reaching out
then-
to us right now, you know.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
we couldn't tell you. Really.
And that's the thing is you've got to unfortunately come to your own conclusions with this, maybe search in a little bit and try to decide, whether it may have been him or a little bit of your grief or a combination of the both.
I think I'd also advise that even if it is just you, it's still beneficial because
Very
you're
much
working
so.
through something. So
Yeah.
whether or not it's just your mind working through
Yeah.
a ritual for your
Right.
grieving, or whether you
Right.
actually had contact, some work is still being done within yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
And then the part 2 of that was, I'm a hairstylist, and I was working on a client, and we were talking about him, and my client said, "Why do you have all the crows on your station?" And I said, "Because that represents him. He's dressed up for like Halloween a lot, and that was his favorite costume, and I met him on that night, and that was like 30 some years ago." And I said, "I just put those out, and I wear like the crow skull because it makes me feel better. It comforts me." And then all of a sudden, the dustpan and the broom shot out from the wall and slapped down to the ground. And me and my client looked at each other, and I go, "I think that's him." Maybe.
You never
Well,
truly
you
know.
never know. It could very well have been.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Yes,
calling
thank you,
in.
Jennifer.
We're going to try to get one more question in before we close.
Thank
well,
you,
actually,
Jennifer.
it's 5 minutes
Thank
too.
you.
Do we
Actually,
have
we're at
another
the
call?
end. Let me tell you, Brian, if you ever want to get a bunch of your calls like you're dying for, do this. Please call in with your
I'm
mediumship
gonna say
story.
I'm gonna
There
start
is
my
a
own
queue.
call.
No. This is we're being too nice. We really need to insist on questions because
There is a
we don't-
queue that I've already dropped a couple of because
But I think it's the energy of this evening that sort of it's gotten on to everyone. Really, honestly,
I
So
don't know
it's-
why.
that's what's happening.
I do have to say I apologize.
The
if I was harsh.
subject.
I know.
yeah.
I apologize if I was harsh earlier to the caller.
No.
or- I have a knee-jerk hatred of this thing that people want to do. Going through the worst loss of my life, which is very public and everyone in this community knows it, so I don't care to talk about it. If the idea that the person that you love is moving around brooms to get your attention is that what you want? I think it is grotesque. Like, it is the last thing on my mind. Like, the people I love, I hope they are nowhere here. I remember Brian one time said something I love. I don't know if you remember this, Brian. You said somebody you'd lost, you were like, "I hope they're riding a dragon in outer space."
I think
don't
I
want
said
them
you better
here-
not summon me to any of my your sad Halloween circles. I'm going to
Exactly.
interrupt.
I love that that has
Jeanette-
stuck with me.
I got that from Jeanette. Jeanette told me once, Karen, many, many years ago, you better not summon me to some sad Halloween ritual when I die, because if I'm riding a dragon through the astral world and all of a sudden I appear at your sad Halloween ritual, I'm going to be
I'm
very
gonna be
cross.
mad.
Exactly. Well, I love
when I
that
was
story.
alive. And I said, "Oh, we wouldn't make you appear. We invite you anyway." But I always thought it was funny. I was always stuck with me because I get it. But if they choose to, we actually don't summon them. We invite them if they want to.
Can I give some
and
positive?
and I
Caitlin
sometimes
suggested-
hope they don't show up.
Brian,
But,
Kaylin suggested that we do a spin-off series where Ellie just fields all these
I'm gonna
calls.
do it. Can I answer? I want to answer.
well, no,
something
I want to
really
say one
positive.
thing though about the show, and then I'll give it to you, Ellie, and then we'll close the show. It is actually we sort of let it go tonight because this is a new format, and then Christian called in and kind of got it going, and I'm the only one who will say no to Christian. But this is a question thing, so you have to have a question. So we don't want to hear stories. I know other call-ins shows do that, but it digresses, and then all you hear is people's stories. And, quite frankly, it's just not my cup of tea. So we'd rather hear your questions if you can do that. So we appreciate it. So we'll be stricter about that in the future, Mr. Levi. If they don't have a question, they don't get to talk. But now Ellie is going to say something, and then I'll close off the show for next week's.
Thank you, Brian and Levi. Just as a teacher of psychic development, I'm a huge proponent of journaling. So for all of you who've called in and are commenting in the chat, and I believe every one of you has had sincere, powerful psychic experiences. I believe the human mind is wired to do this through our instincts, through the ability to do telepathy. 10,000 years ago, there was no computer or cell phone. I believe people could actually leave their body and go look at the field of war and see what was happening. I think humans have really lost a lot of their powers. So for each of you who've called and are sincerely here, interested in this, journal and write about your experience, write the day and the time and what the circumstances were for you, and write your emotional response, and then keep journaling. You'll begin to put pieces together. You'll begin to, and always ask your higher mind or source to come down and teach you about what's really important here. It's not just that we have people that we love die and they're communicating with us. I think that's true. And I think we don't have the right words to describe this energy field that we're all participating in. But I'm a strong advocate for writing your experiences, asking to be seeing more of the truth, meditating on things, and then always bring it back to you, what you need, how you're developing your emotional healing, and use it for yourself that way. Very much so.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you.
So we're going to close the show off with saying thank you, Karen Sayer, for coming on the show.
Blessed be, we love Karen.
Interesting
Karen,
magical topic. It's part of the reason why we have guests come on, is because it gives us some diversity of the topics. I want to ask you now, Mrs. Sayer, what is that? That was the guest.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
It's all right. So if there are people in Washington State, in Spokane where you live, and they're interested in learning about Alexandrian witchcraft, and they want to contact you, how may they do so?
I have an email. It's kind of hard to spell, but you can do the best you can. You can actually list it, and you can contact me through that. It is DUNKELSIDHE. That's Dunkel She. I know it's kind of hard to spell and pronounce, at gmail.com. And you're welcome to contact me through that. I am currently looking for students right now. I am not in the process of teaching, but I would be very much interested in teaching again, as I think it is time in my life.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear that, Karen. That fills me with joy.
Blessed be.
Mm-hmm.
Blessed be. And blessed be to all of you, and we will see you soon.
Right, not done yet.
No, I didn't do it.
Don't take us sick.
Kaylin was
so now I'm
put it in
going
the
to
chat.
say, next, Kaylin's not in charge here. She's in charge everywhere else. Right?
No, I'm saying she put the email for Karen in the chat if people need it.
Oh, I see.
Oh,
thank you, Kaylin. Sorry, I didn't mean to blame you. Levi sounded like he was blaming you. Stop talking, Levi. Anyway, so next week is episode 6, and our special guest will be Christine Stevens, who is another Alexandrian high priestess doing the ambush interview, and she lives in Ohio. Mm-hmm. She used to be the high priestess of the Coven of New Orleans, and is Levi's initiator, I believe. Mm-hmm. So anyway, and my old working partner. So thank you all very much. Until next Thursday, we ride again. Sorry if Levi was mean to you guys.
I was mean tonight. I apologize.
But we do need to follow the rule of, if you're calling in, it's for questions. So especially with 4 people on here, we don't really have room for any more stories. If you want to tell us your stories, contact us online. Right.
Thank you all. Thanks
I'd like
for
to say a really quick thank you to the panel for having me here tonight.
And
thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful night.
We'll be seeing you very soon. And Ellie, just stay on there, and Kaylin will make sure everything's shut down so we can talk real quick.
Shut down everything.